Hey guys, back again with another video, a games I played recently video. I haven't done one of these in a while. I was house slash pet sitting for a friend for 12 days actually, so I played a lot of games during that period, but all the games in this episode are games that unfortunately I dropped. I played through the Uncharted trilogy when I was there on PS4, but I want to wait to do Uncharted series review before I talk about those, and I'd like to play Uncharted 4 and Golden Abyss on the Vita first. We'll start with Final Fantasy 1 and 2, the Origins versions. There's so many different versions of these games, and I wanted to play through these for so long, just to talk about them from a Final Fantasy series review that I'm planning to do at some point. And I can't get into these. I'm sorry. I've tried multiple times, and this was going to be the time that hopefully I could get into them and finish them, but they're just too old for me, sadly. The first one, we'll talk about the first one first. It barely has a story. There's so many random encounters. The battles are quite simplistic and boring. The music's great, but it's so old that it's hard for me to get into. I just was not having any fun with it. And Final Fantasy 2 is even worse because it's got all the same problems. It's way too many random encounters. You can only save on the world map. The battle system being kind of boring. But then, at least the first game has a traditional leveling up system. Final Fantasy 2, you have to, you take a lot of damage to get your HP up. Your stats all come very randomly. It's a complete mess, and it just doesn't work very well. It's tedious, and it just wasn't fun. I know it does have a little bit more of a story focus, the second game. I don't know if the story gets better towards the end, but unfortunately, these are definitely my least favorite games in the series. Now, I know the GBA versions and the PSP versions are the best way to play these games, and maybe those are really updated compared to this, the Origins versions, but Square Enix doesn't want to put them on the eShop on the Wii U or on the PlayStation Network. In Europe, the PSP ones are on the PlayStation Network, but in North America, they're not. It's really frustrating, actually, but until then, they're just going to have to be those games that I look back on with appreciation and kind of see where the series has come since then. But I wish I did play these, or at least the first one, on NES back in the day. Maybe if I had nostalgia, I could get into it more, but I don't know, man. These NES RPGs, you can update them all you want, but they're just always going to feel old and outdated for me, unfortunately. But yeah, I dropped both of these games after a few hours, unfortunately. But for my Final Fantasy series review, definitely, unless I play the GBA versions and really enjoy them, expect the first 3 Final Fantasy games to rank pretty low on the list. The next game is Dragon Quest IV: Chapters of the Chosen on the DS. And I think I talked about this game before in an impressions video, or maybe another games I played recently video a long time ago. I seem to remember it was around the time I reviewed BioShock Infinite, so maybe some of you can go back and check out a previous video. But this is my second time trying to get into this game, and yeah, unfortunately I can't get into it, which is kind of a shame because a lot of people think this is one of the best Dragon Quest games, and now this is an NES game. The original game, Dragon Warrior 4, it's on the NES. This is a remake, and it feels old in a lot of ways, and I know I've really struggled to get into Dragon Quest, I gotta say. I liked 8 from what I played. I put in 30 hours into 8 on the PS2, but the random encounters started to drive me insane, and later, some of the dungeons in that game, they had really taxing puzzles, and you were trying to get these puzzles done, and you were running into a random encounter every 5 seconds, and it got so frustrating that I dropped the game. And I'm actually planning to go back to it on the 3DS, because that game, a lot of people, I don't think, know this, but the 3DS remake of Dragon Quest VIII, it looks significantly worse than on the PS2, but that version has no random encounters. You can see the enemies in the dungeons and on the map, which is amazing to me. That's going to basically get me through that game, I think, and it might end up being my favorite. But Dragon Quest IV, where to start with this? The big thing with this game, and at the time it came out, this was really new. A lot of RPGs, in fact, I don't think any RPG had done this, but it has this chapter system going on, where you start like there's like a prologue. There's chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, and each chapter you have a new cast of characters that you play as. And by the end of the game, apparently, all your characters kind of meet up together, and then you know, kind of save the world or whatnot. So the structure of the game is kind of unique in that way. And each chapter, all your characters start back at level 1. And like I said before, it's an entirely new cast of characters. And that way of telling a story is pretty unique, and you still don't see that too often in RPGs. Mother 3 was sort of like that. Not completely like that, but it had elements of that. Unfortunately, it's just not my type, my thing, I think, with storytelling. And the fact that your character started at level 1 was very frustrating to me. It just, I don't know, it just didn't feel good to me. And a lot of this game is very traditional with Dragon Quest. Like, the battle system is very simplistic. There's not much to it. It's very slow moving. There's random encounter. The random encounter rate in this game is fucking insane. Like, every 5 seconds you're in a battle. And a lot of times the battles have so many enemies that it takes forever to get through them. And a lot of enemies like to call for backup, so the battles get extended even longer. It was just, I don't know, the game was such a slog for me. I was really having a hard time getting into it. One of the main issues I have with this game, and I can understand that the NES game wouldn't have this, but, like, for fuck's sakes, let me save anywhere. This game has so many of these massive dungeons where you gotta go through, like, this massive dungeon, and you fight a boss at the end, and then you have to make your way all the way back out with no save points. Like, getting through a whole dungeon, exploring the whole dungeon, opening all the treasure chests, and getting to the boss just to die is so frustrating. Now, of course, like, you do get sent back to the church where you can resurrect all your characters, but it costs a shit ton of money, and money is hard to come by in the early game in this. Like, you don't get a whole lot of money. And it takes a lot of grinding. Your characters start off very weak. Some of the dungeons, the enemies are so much stronger than you, so you have to grind like mad. And I know the Dragon Quest games have always been quite grindy. That's, you know, that's kind of like what they're known for. But it was so frustrating to me. And then all the gameplay issues I had with the game, you know, feeling just way too old school and dated for me, combined with the chapter system, the way the game told its story, I don't know. The translation is also really weird. Like, the language they use is very, like, old-time English. It's quite hard to understand a lot of the characters, honestly. And it's just irritating. I actually think the translation of this game is very irritating. I guess they're going for, like, this charming kind of feel, but it wasn't charming to me. It was just kind of annoying. Now, I like the visuals. I like the updated visuals for this DES remake, but I think they could have done a lot more to update the gameplay. But I know Dragon Quest fans are very stingy with that. They don't want too many drastic changes, which, you know, I guess I can appreciate. The series kind of flies in the face of most RPG series. Like, Final Fantasy got super experimental as that series went on, but Dragon Quest has always kind of stayed traditional, which is fairly admirable, I must say. But Dragon Quest VIII and, like, the newer Dragon Quest games are far more appealing to me than this. Now, I did move on to Dragon Quest V after this. I got maybe like 8 hours into Dragon Quest IV before I dropped it, and I'm about 15, almost 20 hours into Dragon Quest V now, and I actually like it a lot better. The main reason is the way that game tells its story. Dragon Quest V, I'm going to wait to do like an impressions or a review on it to dive deep into the game, but that game, you have this character that starts as a child, and you see your main character grow up, and eventually you get married, and I love that. I wish more RPGs did that. I think it's really cool. And there's like this long time pass where like 10 years have passed, and you get to see all these characters that you grew up with as a kid, and see how their lives change, and you get to see how the world has changed. I think it's really fascinating, so that's kind of pulled me in a little more at Dragon Quest V. And the fact that I didn't, every chapter I don't start back at level 1, so I can kind of build up my characters. That game also has like a monster raising element where you can kind of recruit monsters into your party, and that's pretty addictive and fun. I mean, the battle system in Dragon Quest V, like, I still have a bunch of complaints with Dragon Quest V. I'll talk about them when I eventually do a review of that game. Like, I think it can be a bit of a slog, and it's hard to play Dragon Quest V without a podcast, but I feel like that game has more going for it than Dragon Quest IV. Unfortunately, yeah, Dragon Quest IV, I don't think I'm going to be going back to it. Not my thing, unfortunately. The next game is Shin Megami Tensei Strange Journey for the DS, and man, I really wanted to love this game, but unfortunately, just not for me. Like with every single first-person dungeon crawler I've played, I can't stand it. I've really tried to get into this genre, and I think I just have to accept the fact that it's just not my thing. Where do we start with this? Okay, there's a lot to like about this game. I played it for around 8 hours before I dropped it. For one, the setting in this game is awesome. It takes place in Antarctica, and basically there's like this event that happens in the world. I forget what they call it, some like weird word, but it's like a black void that kind of appears in Antarctica, and you're a part of like this task force that has to kind of investigate. And I don't really want to say any more than that, but it's this really intriguing setup, and the world here is really interesting. I think it's different than in the other SMT games, but you investigate this base, and then of course you find demons, and then things go on from there. The story is very interesting, and the characters I thought were quite interesting in the beginning as well. And you kind of have this like base that you keep returning to once you're done going through like the dungeons, and the setting is just really unique. You don't see it too much, especially in JRPGs. And the atmosphere in this game is top notch. Like it's just like there's this sense of foreboding that kind of permeates this game that I just fucking love. And the music in this game is incredible. Like it's so unique, where it's kind of like symphonic in a lot of ways. Like there's a lot of like choir type parts in this music, but it's got like this eerie vibe to it, and it matches with the atmosphere so well. It's honestly one of the most interesting and unique soundtracks I've ever heard. So yeah, we're starting off with positives here with this game. The battle system is pretty good. It's not my favorite from what I've seen of SMT games. It doesn't have the press turn system, which is I think one of the biggest letdowns with this game. Instead, there's like this demon co-op system where if you have a bunch of demons that have their alignment the same as your character, you'll basically do like these co-op attacks where your character will attack, and then one of those demons that have the same alignment as you will do like a follow-up attack, so you can do extra damage. So you want to be considerate of your party setup and what demons you have, and make sure the alignments are all like kind of similar. It's kind of frustrating because in the beginning it's hard to get your alignment to like a chaos or forget what the positive one was, but the positive route. So you're kind of like in this neutral. You have like this neutral karma, and finding like other demons that are neutral in the beginning of the game is quite difficult. So you can't really use the co-op system a whole lot in the beginning. I assume that opens up more. But yeah, it was a bit of a bummer to see that the press turn system wasn't in. You're fighting demons through like these first-person dungeons. You've got the demon recruitment system, which the more SMT games I play, the more flawed this system seems to me. It's especially frustrating in a game that's as balls hard as this, where it's just complete luck and trial and error that you pick the right dialogue choices, that demons will join you, and it can be quite frustrating. So yeah, I honestly, I don't know. The more SMT games I play, the more that system is kind of flawed to me. But whatever. The first-person dungeon crawling is why I couldn't get into this game. It reminds me a lot of Etrian Odyssey. In fact, the map on the bottom screen is identical. Now, this doesn't have like the mapping features. You can't like draw symbols on the map, and you can't map out the dungeons yourself. It has like an auto map feature. But it's still kind of tedious to explore in this game because everything looks the same. I find this is a huge problem with first-person dungeon crawlers. Like, the design is just really, I don't know, everything looks the same, and it's just not fun to explore. And I get really, I kind of got like this OCD thing where I feel like I need to fully complete these dungeons. And to do that, you have to do constant backtracking. But the way encounters work in this game is that you're always going to be encountering an enemy at a certain point, where you've got this meter at the top. And the Etrian Odyssey games work in the same way, where it starts off blue, and when you take a step, it will stay blue. But if you take enough steps, it will turn yellow, and then red, and then you'll fight a battle. So basically every, like, I don't know how many steps it is, but we'll just say 25 steps. 25 steps, you'll fight a battle. And that's never going to change. And it makes exploration such a pain in the ass, where I had to kind of cheat the system a bit. You'll find, like, save terminals and healing terminals throughout these dungeons. And I found, like, if I was, like, gonna run, like, if I needed to get to a boss from, like, a save terminal, and I had my meter was red, so I was gonna run into an enemy before the boss. I'd be like, well, fuck that. There's a chance I'll die. So I would just reset the entire game because that kind of cheats it a bit. So my encounter meter is back to blue, so I can get from the save point to the boss without running into any enemies. And if I have to do that, that's pretty fucked up. I don't like that at all. The saving is it's not generous at all. Like, the save points are few and far between. And when you map out this giant floor of the dungeon and you're feeling great, you're mapping out this thing and you're doing so well, and you run into this just really super powerful group of enemies, and they wipe you out, and you go back to a save point and your map, it's gone. All the progress you made charting that map is gone. I can't tell you how frustrating that is to me. Nothing makes me want to stop playing a game more than that. And this kind of feeling I've had with every first-person dungeon crawler I've played. I don't know, man. Just the brutal difficulty combined with just the tedious exploration of this game. I don't know. It got to a point where I was just not having fun with the game, despite the decent battle system and the really intriguing setting. And it really, looking back at SMT4. I really liked the fact that game let you save anywhere. I think that made me enjoy that game way more than I would have. And playing this makes me worried a bit about playing Digital Devil Saga and Nocturne, because apparently the save points are not very generous in those games at all. But then again, at least those are third-person games, dungeon crawlers. So maybe I'll be able to get into those more. And of course the press turn system too, which I really missed in this one as well. But yeah, Strange Journey. There's a lot going for this game, and I think if you love first-person dungeon crawlers and you want this really challenging, hardcore game, you're gonna love this. I can see why it has a cult following, but sadly, yeah, not for me. And the last game is Banjo Tooie on Xbox Live. I played this on Rare Replay. They had Rare Replay on an Xbox One there. So I knew I had to play it. And looking at all the games on the disc, Banjo Tooie is the game that jumped out at me because Banjo Kazooie is one of my favorite games ever. It's my favorite 3D platformer. I just think that game is amazing. So I was excited to play the sequel. And unfortunately, I gotta say, this game really let me down. I think it's a very disappointing sequel. Now, I might have actually finished it. I dropped it, but I think I might have finished it if I had more time. I played this towards the end of the 2 weeks, so I just couldn't get it finished in time. But I did like it less and less the more I played. It's a more humorous and story-driven game than the first. There's a lot more dialogue. But I was surprised at how much I laughed at this game. Bottles from the first game dies very early, and there's a bunch of jokes about his death, and it's I don't want to spoil them, but they're pretty hilarious. And your characters, Banjo Kazooie, don't even tell Bottles' wife and their kids that he died. She's just like, oh, I can't wait till Bottles gets back and helps with the chores or whatever. And then Kazooie's just like, about that. Never mind. It was just, I don't know, it was kind of surprising to me in a game on the N64 that there was that dark kind of humor. Well, I guess there was, Conker's Bad Fur Day, but for a Banjo game, I was kind of surprised by that. But yeah, gameplay, it's got a similar formula where you're basically going to all these different worlds, getting enough jiggies to unlock a new world, and eventually making your way to the final boss. There's a giant hub world in this game, and one of the big differences is the interconnected feel that this game has, where you go to this, I forget what his name is, like the Jiggy King or whatever, and if you have enough jiggies, you can do this puzzle piece mini game to unlock a new world in the hub world, and the hub world has all these different other worlds that you go to, and they are all connected with each other. In the original game, you had these separate worlds that were their own thing, these small, tightly designed worlds, and you couldn't travel from one world to another. But in this game, there's a train station where you can ride to different worlds, and they're all interconnected in some really cool ways. So I really did like that. But I really feel like this game is too big for its own good. A lot of these environments are so huge that it takes forever to get anywhere. And Rare knew this because there's teleport pads you have to use to travel from one end of these worlds to another. and it can be quite tedious. This game is really tedious at times. Another big gameplay thing with this game is switching characters. You don't just play as Banjo and Kazooie. You can basically find like these creatures that you give to these NPC characters in the world, and that allows you to change into different characters. You might change it to like a fridge, or like this car, or this dinosaur, and you're gonna have to change into these characters to get certain jiggies. But unfortunately, to change into these characters, you can't just change into them on the fly. You have to go back to like a Mumbo's hut, and then talk to him, and then you change into him, and then you can do whatever you need to do. And this got so tedious by like the halfway point in this game that it was just starting to drive me crazy, especially combined with all the walking and running you have to do. Like, the environments in this game are way too big. And one of my biggest disappointments with this game is like the increased focus on minigames. It felt to me like 80% of this game, getting a Jiggy, required you to do some minigame. Now, some of them are okay, but a lot of them are very frustrating, and a lot of them require you to aim in first person. You get kind of like a reticle on the screen, but you can't, like, it controls so horribly, where it's got like this snapback thing, where if you let go of the analog stick when you're like aiming down or up, left or right, it snaps back into the center. And you can't change this. There's no setting to change this. So it makes aiming a pain in the ass. And a lot of the bosses that you'll fight and a lot of the Jiggy minigames require like really precise aiming. And it got really frustrating. There's like these first-person segments that you have to do, which actually were okay. I was expecting them to be worse. But there's a lot of like these minigames where you have to like shoot a bunch of colored balloons. Like, I was shocked at how many minigames were in this game. In fact, there's barely any actual platforming, and I think that's the biggest disappointment with this game. Banjo Kazooie, there's plenty of good platforming, but in this, it just, I don't know, there just wasn't much of it. One of the cool things is that you do keep all your moves from the first game, so all your time spent in this game is getting new moves, and some of them are pretty cool, but I was surprised just how, like, you didn't use a lot of them, really, especially for, like, platforming. And, like, this game has one of the most overwhelming levels I've seen in a video game. It's this place called Pterodactyl Land, and it blew my mind how big this place was. All like these different cave entrances, and a lot of the worlds in this game are like segmented, where you have to like go into different other locations. Like, the world is called Pterodactyl Land, but there'll be like this area called Inside the Mountain. There'll be like this area called Unga Bunga's Cave. There'll be all these other separate areas, and it's such a pain in the ass to get from one area to the next. And this Pterodactyl Land, there's like all these different pathways. There's like tons of verticality to it. There's all these NPCs all over the place. I really didn't know where to start in this place. Like, I was so fucking overwhelmed, and I just hated going through that place and figuring out what I had to do. And for some of the Jiggies, you had to do things in such a specific order. A lot of the Jiggies in this game have some really obtuse bullshit. I had to use a guide constantly throughout this game. The controls I found were very finicky a lot of the times. Like, in the Pterodactyl Land, you had to do a lot of character switching, but if you didn't have the right character, you were basically fucked, and you had to do things in a certain order where you'd use one character for this one specific part to be able to do another part, and then that you needed another character, and just, oh my god, like, this game is like, it just got worse and worse the further I got into it, and the more challenging, I guess, they tried to make it. Like, the first few worlds are okay, where things start simple enough, but by the time I got to Pterodactyl Land and Grintilda Industries, which is like this factory level with like security cameras that spawn like respawning enemies, and the security cameras themselves spawn, like, they respawn. If you destroy them, they'll respawn after like 10 seconds. Like, oh man, like, I don't know, this game started to get really frustrating to me by the halfway point. You also can't get all the Jiggies in a world your first time through. You actually, to get all the Jiggies in, say, the first world, you're going to have to get an ability from way later in the game, and then you're going to have to backtrack. And that was frustrating to me as well. So, I don't know, it's weird. This game came out after Donkey Kong 64, and sadly, I feel like they took too much from that game. Now, they don't go as overboard with the collectibles in this as DK64, but it's like they looked at that game and said, oh, those huge environments, we need those back for this new Banjo game. And I don't know, man. I missed the more tightly designed worlds of Banjo Kazooie, and just the actual platforming that game had. Like, there's hardly any of it in this. Um, so yeah, Banjo Tooie. I don't know. Like, I feel like this is a well-regarded game, but I gotta say, it really disappointed me. I don't know. I don't know. I still think it's a decent game. I enjoyed my time with it mostly, although I started to hate it by the time I got to like Pterodactyl Land and the Gruntilda Industries. I'm curious what the other worlds are like, if they're as annoying and tedious to go through. But yeah, this was definitely a bit of a bummer. Now I still need to play Banjo Kazooie Nuts and Bolts. I know that's a divisive game, but at least that has like this kind of unique thing going for it. But I know it's not really. I shouldn't really consider that a Banjo Kazooie game. But yeah, Banjo Tooie disappointment, unfortunately. But yeah, that's it, guys. I did play like Battletoads Arcade and Battletoads and a bunch of other small games on Rare Replay. Battletoads Arcade is actually a really awesome game. I highly recommend anyone that has an Xbox One to try that on Rare Replay. But yeah, those are games I played recently. Yeah, unfortunately dropped all of them. I did finish the Uncharted games though, and I actually enjoyed them for the most part. I still have a lot of issues with those games, but we'll get to that later. But what have you guys been playing recently? If you played any of these games, what do you think of them? Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.
Huh?